Good morning. It is Friday, May 17th, and I thought I would take you along while I work today and do my garden tour at the same time. This is wall bed number 1, and it's got kale throughout. It's got volunteer potatoes. We have 2 different types of lettuce. We have collards, and then when it turns the corner and becomes wall bed 2, it starts with the carrots. So today I'm going to be going through and harvesting lots of kale and the collards and get more of that dehydrated and frozen. This wall bed will be emptied out in the next week or two by the end of May, because this is where I'm going to be putting sweet potatoes. So I'm just harvesting everything down really low. I might do one more picking before the month is over, but maybe not. We'll see. Normally, if it was winter or fall, I would be harvesting these leaves more like one at a time. And I would also have the plants a little more separated. But because this was a spring planting, I seeded them really close together because I wanted them to shade the dirt out. And I'm not expecting these to last all summer because they don't love the heat. So I'm planning on just taking them out in big groups like this. I've got way too much here. It's not all going to fit in my dehydrators. My freezers are getting to the point where I don't want to put too many more greens in them because I have plans to put other stuff in the space that I have left. And the kids can come through here anytime and pick any greens they want to be able to give to the chickens for snacks. This big bowl, and I only cleared this section. So I still have a lot more kale to go. I will wait and harvest lettuce this afternoon and keep it in the fridge for weekend salads. I did harvest a good bit of collards yesterday to share with a couple people, so I'm not going to take any more out today. I sent the kale in to Missy Mess. She is cleaning the kitchen, so she's going to get that rinsed off and dehydrating. And I don't have room in the dehydrator for more of this, so I'll wait until Sunday or Monday, whichever day isn't drenching rain, to get more collards and kale to do a second round of dehydrating. So we'll turn the corner at wall bed 2. There's nothing I would be doing in this bed today other than looking for a few weeds to pull. But we've got all carrots, a volunteer potato plant or 2, and onions. Not spying any weeds in there. And then these carrots are 2 weeks younger than those, so they're a little smaller. Another volunteer potato. More onions. These are all the onions I started from seed. That's all I could get this year. Volunteer potato. Calendula does not need any attention. Don't see any weeds there. There's a little chamomile on the corner. Another volunteer potato. And some nasturtium flowers on the end. So this would be wall bed 4. This is what the weeding looks like. Oh, weeds. Let me pull them. Isn't that nice? If you've been gardening for any significant amount of time, you will appreciate that simple weeding. The ones I can't reach from this side, I'll get when I'm on the inside of the bed. Look at all the weeds. They do get more intense, as summer goes along and it gets warmer. But if I can stay on top of this 2 or 3 days a week and get them while they're little, then it never becomes a big issue to pull weeds. So it's the beginning of Crimson Sweet watermelons. And these are a new type of everbearing strawberry I've put in. Insert video here to remind me of what type they are. So these were just planted a month or so ago, not long. The kale that I let go to seed, or to flower and then seed, the bees and the butterflies, they just loved it. They were all over it during the cooler months when there wasn't much else blooming. So I'm just letting these develop and make good seed to have for another season. And I'll take that out and put something else in sometime later. So wall beds 7, 8, and 9 are full of potatoes. These first two beds, 7 and the corner one, 8, those were started in February. So they've got a good 90 days just about of growth on them so far. There's a few little potatoes starting to poke out. So I'll come out and probably dump some dirt in the center parts here. I did put dirt on some of the edge ones already, just to cover up any potatoes that are trying to peek through. Let's look over here. It's kind of hard to get in here and see anything. I don't see any potatoes peeking through in this part. Looks good. And this is bed number 9. These potatoes were started, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later. But these are Yukon Gold and those are reds, Pontiac Reds. So the corner of number 10 here has spinach in it that I am letting go to seed. This is Bloomsdale Longstanding. And I want to collect spinach seeds this summer, so letting that take place. So this bed will not get to be for peppers like I wanted, since I chose to let these go to seed. They're going to take space up a bit longer. This half of the garden starts wall bed 11, and this spinach I am not letting go to seed because it's a different variety. I don't want them to cross-pollinate, if that's a thing with spinach. So I'm going to go ahead and finish harvesting these out and just take the rest of these spinach for eating. And then I have a trellis here with cucumbers. There's 3 on each side, which may be a little bit crowded, but I didn't want to risk planting only 1 or 2 and then at least 1 dying. So I planted 3 on each side, and if I have to, I will cut 1 off. So let's get that spinach picked right now while I'm thinking about it. I'm considering, if I'm just going to take all the spinach off, it's probably better just to cut the whole plant at the bottom. But what I'm going to do is take the leaves off first, since these aren't really good for cutting the full deep stem off. I'll cut the leaves off first and then come back in with bigger clippers and cut them flush at the bottom of the soil. I haven't thought about if there's anything that I want to grow inside the cucumbers. This year, because of where I have this trellis placed, I will have access from the middle. So it might be a good idea to put lettuce seeds under here, because they'll get shaded very well from the cucumbers once they are up. So I might consider doing that. I do already have lettuce on the northern side of my house that has sprouted, ready for summer growing. Stays cooler and shadier on the north side of the house, so that's a great spot to grow cool loving plants in the summer. All right, that's about all I want from these, so let me get my clippers to cut the plants flush at the bottom. My 2 main choices for removing smaller stuff from the garden are these big clippers and these little fiskars. It's going to be a little harder to get in with these, so I'm going to see if the fiskars can take care for me. And just snap it right off at the bottom. I'll say that for the chickens. The roots can stay in the soil, give the worms something to munch on. I've got some greens you can have for the chickens when you want them. So that spinach is cleaned out. I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't really have anything to do with this strawberry bed right now, but let me insert here which type of strawberries these are. These are also everbearing. So other than coming through and looking for a few bigger weeds or significant weeds, like, oh, look at that big one. If you're the type that likes to pop pimples, this kind of weed pulling is pleasurable. It's relaxing. Ever since we did these walls, the weeding has become like I imagined it would. Much easier. Because we don't have weeds flowing into the garden every time it rains. Oh, hello. All right, here we have the strawberries there. This is wall bed 12. I planted green beans to go around these Roma tomatoes. So they are planted too close together. I just wanted to make sure I was going to have good germination and I wouldn't have blanks. So I am going to come in and either transplant some elsewhere or just snip them off at the ground level. Oh, look. Volunteer potato plant. We don't want a potato over here. Okay. So there's going to be green beans with Roma tomatoes here in the rest of wall bed 12. Hello. And on the back side of the wall, I've got chamomile plants growing. All right, so 13, 14, 15, and 16 are all potatoes. We've got 3 beds of Pontiac Reds and a 4th bed of russets. That has been the home of many a bluebirds every year, and this year I think they had at least 4 babies, maybe 5. That's my hose, and I limbo lower now. I don't have anything to do with the potato beds, so they just keep growing. Not much of a bother. I have added a lot of soil around these in previous weeks, so there shouldn't be any potatoes poking out. I was just lifting and adding dirt around them just to make sure I'm not going to have anything get exposed to the sun later. And bed 17 has strawberries, 2 more chamomile over there, and those are some carnations I haven't transplanted yet. So these ever-bearing strawberries are quinlets. My sister-in-law gave me a bunch of babies a year or 2 ago, and these are just delicious. So we'll get to picking those. Let's do that next. The strawberries came up thinner in this end of the bed this year, so I did have a bunch of lettuce interplanted here. You may have seen in previous videos, but I have been clipping and using and sharing those with friends and family. Some of these I'm going to pick maybe slightly early. We've got 2 more days of rain coming this weekend, and I'd rather have, yeah, that one I'm not going to pick yet. See how yellow that is still? I'd rather have almost ripe strawberries than lose them all to mushiness in the rain. Yep, I'll take that one. No, I'm going to leave that one. If I see a strawberry that isn't quite ripe and I'm going to leave it here, if I can find a way to lay it on a leaf so it's not in the dirt, that really helps it to not get too mushy. Doesn't helps it so there's no slugs in the dirt that try to chew on it. That one's good. All right, that's it from this bed. Let's go check the strawberry towers. Conjoined strawberry. Here's our strawberry haul for today. And unless someone comes out here like they usually do and randomly eats strawberries during the day, I probably won't pick again until Monday and get another bowl like that. But all of that is just from these towers and those beds. My other 2 strawberry beds are new this spring, so they are not going to be producing just yet. They might before the year's over give me some, since ever-bearing strawberries will make fruit until it's too cold. It's about time for me to finish taking lettuce out of these. So if I'm going to get lettuce for the weekend, it will probably be from these strawberry towers instead of a wall. And I did have a few beds where I seeded some lettuce a couple weeks ago. So I'm probably going to pull a few of those out and transplant them into more empty spots here. And it will do okay as long as I keep everything watered and we don't start getting 85, 90 degree days right away. Which I don't think we will in the next few weeks. Here's more lettuce and more lettuce. So as I take these out, I can put some more in. So while the rest of this bed, like I said, had fewer strawberries here, I did have a bunch of lettuce growing all spring. I tucked in the last of my basil plants here. I've never planted them in a grouping like that before. I usually spread them out single file. But I'm going off someone's YouTube recommendation that they like to grow in groups also. I didn't want to split them up and risk damaging more roots, so I just planted them all together. And they will get easily head height for me by the end of summer. So the picking will be fun because I can stand up to harvest. And it might shade out the strawberries a little bit so they don't get too hot midsummer. These are tomato plants that I'm not going to be using. I was able to give away about 20 plants, maybe a little more yesterday, to a few different people. So this is the last wall bed, number 18. We've got parsley on this corner and that corner, and a sage plant back here. But everything's being crowded out by the rest of the spinach seeds that I threw in this spring. So I'm going to harvest those up. Not all of them are starting to bolt. Like maybe, look, this plant's got a little seed head starting. So I might take that whole plant out just to give a little more space on that one. But the rest I'll let keep growing in case I can get another week or 2 of good harvest off this spinach. So let's get that picked up and added to our spinach bowl. Here's our spinach from down below in bed 10, and now we're going to finish it off with the spinach from bed 18. And I am selectively taking the larger leaves from the outside edge, so the little ones in the middle will keep growing bigger. And most of this spinach will go in the refrigerator for fresh eating in salads and smoothies this week. And if I don't think we're going to eat it all fresh, I will throw the rest in the freezer for smoothies, lasagna, things like that. And I don't blanch the spinach. I never have. I just put it in once I've rinsed it and dried it, and it always is great to work with when I pull it out of the freezer. But the things I use it for are, like I said, spinach, lasagna. You could cook it We don't like cooked spinach right now. Doesn't mean we won't like it in the future, but currently it is not our favorite plant. Our favorite way to eat greens, cooking them. And I'm tossing those stems in a bucket for the chickens. This big one. There's nothing wrong with having bug bites on your food. If the bugs can eat it, you can eat it too. I'm just looking for all the big leaves. These guys are getting tall, reaching for the sun because of the parsley. So I'm just going to help them out and put them in the bowl for eating. Oh, I forgot there's a lettuce plant back here also. I already dehydrated 4 trays of parsley earlier this week, and I will probably do some more trays next week. We don't use a lot of parsley, like in pasta sauce and maybe my chicken style seasoning. I use parsley, that's about it. But it doesn't mean we won't like it more in the future. Okay. And there's basically no weeds to deal with in this bed because the plants are big and they've shaded out any opportunity for weeds to grow. So now we'll get those in to be cleaned up and stored. All right, so I went inside and helped finish up with the greens, cleaning and storing. Do you see those cute little baby chicks? That is 3 dozen black Australorp chicks. That buyer is coming to pick them up this afternoon. All right, so that big bowl of spinach got us 2 trays of dehydrators and 1 more freezer bag packed full. So I put that in the freezer, and the spinach was enough to fill 2-gallon bags about 75% of the way. And I just put those in the fridge for fresh eating for this week. All right, so the work for the wall beds is done, and now I need to go through the ground beds and see how things are and see what needs done here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 on the other side. 1 and 2 and 7 and 8 all have potatoes, and then peas on the trellises. These potatoes were planted last a few weeks after the other ones, so they are still pretty small. Don't know what kind of harvest I'll get from those 3, 4 plants, but the rest are doing great. These are all Yukon Gold in the ground. And these peas I let the kids plant up here because normally with my regular batch of peas, which are shelling peas, they're English peas, I'm either shelling and freezing those or saving them for seed. And I'm really picky about not letting anybody eat those peas, and people get upset with me. So this year they got to plant their own, so they can eat from all these trellises anytime they want. They don't have to ask. So these potatoes are the only part where it's not very thick, and I see a few little weeds come up in here, and I will use my stirrup hoe to get those in a minute. Now, the broccoli is in bed 3 and 6. It was all broccoli. I've taken just about all the heads out of the broccoli, and you'll see my other broccoli beds in a few minutes, and those I've taken, I think, all the heads. I don't think I've missed any. There might be some side shoots to get still. But I am going to start removing several of these broccoli plants a day, giving them to the chickens. Some of the leaves we might save to dehydrate if there's room in the dehydrator this coming week. And I have planted zinnias in a few spots where broccoli didn't come up or I've already taken out. So there will be zinnias in some of these beds. Beds 4 and 5 were cauliflower, and I'm thrilled at how great this cauliflower is looking. So let's see, if I put the bottom of my hand at the bottom, I can't put my hand around the whole thing. If I go to the middle. So a few of these don't have heads yet. Cauliflower and broccoli are hit or miss when you plant them in the spring here, because if we end up having a really warm spring, then you're not going to get a good crop. So I'm thankful for what I'm getting for these. A few more zinnias, a tomato plant from last year. I'm going to go ahead and pull those. We'll use those onions probably this week or next week. Here's the rest of the cauliflower, and some of the heads are little and still forming. But I noticed yesterday there's a couple that are getting big, and one of them even looks like it's starting to split a little. So I need to get that out today. And this one plant, as you noticed, I make a lot of plants and I don't always do them all, and I did not cover any of these, even knowing the cabbage moth was going to come. I have seen the cabbage moth for the last 2 weeks or so. And this plant, these holes are from the cabbage moth. So when I cut this head, I'm going to have to clean it a little more closely to make sure the worms are out of there. We all know worms don't hurt, but the kids are sometimes a little bothered if they see a worm on their food. They'll get over it eventually. So this is the head that's starting to split out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and definitely get that one cut today. But these are looking great. I mean, like, what are these things? Like, for a head this big, you're talking at least $6. Organic at the grocery store? I mean, you get little tiny heads in the winter for $4 or $5. Like half this size. So it's not like hugely amazing, but if you love cauliflower as much as I have come to love it in the last 3 or 4 years, this is thrilling. I will be steaming to blanch them and freezing whatever I don't eat fresh. So I won't pick them all at once. I'll pick them as I want to eat them, unless it suddenly gets really warm and they all try to start splitting their flower heads up. Then I would pick them all at once. But otherwise, that's what's going on in this bed. And then with this broccoli that needs to be taken out, there's some more zinnias here. It's somewhere in one of these. You know, earlier this week, we ate the last spaghetti squash from our 2026 harvest. And I took those seeds and I put them in 5 or 6 different spots. That's where one of them is. So I don't know if the spaghetti squash seeds are going to come up. I don't know if they're going to come up pure if they weren't cross-pollinated last year. But I just threw them in the ground anyway. I don't normally plant my winter squash until later in June for a fall harvest. But if those come up, I'll be thrilled. If not, the seeds were just going to go to the chickens anyway. All right. I'm going to go ahead and pull the cauliflower now. And then we'll finish looking at the rest of the beds. This is one time when I cannot use the scissors. I have to use these big loppers. So I come all the way down to the bottom of the plant. I'll get you in a little closer. Weeds. All right, I'm going to get down as close as I can to the root at the bottom, even if it means I get a little dirt on my blades, because I want to leave the root in the ground for the dirt, for the worms. All right, so we got a clean cut. I'll take this over and clean it off. All right, and I'm going to give all of these greens to the chickens. Right. I'm going to come back in with my loppers and cut the rest of that head off with a stem. It's probably better like with a machete. I'm not interested in almost cutting my hands off because I would do that. All right. So this head is a little mal-shaped. It wanted to go to seed sooner, but it's still perfectly edible. We're going to get that in, washed off, chopped up, and enjoy that with lunch today. Yummy. I went ahead and pulled the plant that was being eaten up by the cabbage worms. Okay, here's what they look like. See that guy right there? Those little guys turn into white moths, and they love brassicas. They'll eat your kale, squish him, your collards, your broccoli. I don't know what that thing is. I'll flick him off. I'll inspect it a little more when I get inside to wash it. And if we don't eat it for lunch today, it can wait until Sunday, or I'll blanch it. The rest I'm going to let keep growing because it's going to keep being cool and wet, and the plants will love that. Came in and took out 3 more broccoli plants from the end of this bed just to add to the wagon for the chickens. And my plans for these beds, other than the zinnias that are in them, and maybe 1 or 2 random winter squash plants, the spaghetti squash, is I'm going to put pinto beans. Maybe black beans, but I think pinto, because the black beans I have love to climb, and I'm not going to put trellises. Here I'm just going to do the pinto beans and let them fill the beds. It's obviously not enough pinto beans to feed us for a whole year. We are vegetarian, and beans are a main protein source for us, so we have them multiple times a week. But it is nice to grow our own, and then we have the seeds set aside if we ever need to grow a lot one year. We'll just rip up the side yard and plant them wherever we can. But we do have fun with the ones that we do grow. We collect them when the shells are dried out at the end of summer, and we keep them in brown grocery bags. And then throughout the winter, as we're enjoying the wood stove and having maybe family reading time in the evening, whoever isn't reading gets a bowl full of bean shells, and they shell the beans. And so after a few weeks or a few months, depending on how often we do it and how many we have, then all the beans are shelled. And it's nice to have one less thing that you don't have to try to fit into summer when you're busy with other stuff. You can just do that shelling later on. All right, so peas and potatoes are in these 4 beds. Like I said, these are all Yukon Gold. I did side dress these with more dirt probably 2 weeks ago, just to be sure I'm not going to have anything turn green from the sun. So that's the end of ground bed 8. And this is ground bed 9. And right here I'm going to insert a clip. I transplanted all these pepper plants last night, so I just want to remind myself of which plants are where in case the labels disappear this summer. Before I forget, I just want to record which plants I planted where so I can look back later. I have 3 rows of peppers here. The first one is a paprika. That was the only paprika pepper plant that sprouted. 2, 4, 6. The next 6 are all pimentos. In the next row, 2, 4, 6. Okay. In the next row of 7, where the silver cages are, the 2 on the very end are going to be orange bell peppers. And the last 5 are also pimentos. So I have 5 pimentos in the middle, and then I have 6 pimentos on the edge. And on the northern side of the bed, in the first 6 cages, it is yellow bell peppers. Those are just calendula plants, but the yellow bell peppers are in the first 6 cages. And then I have one solo red bullnose pepper out here on the end by itself. So it's one red bullnose, 6 yellow bell peppers. And then 11 in those 2 rows, 11 pimento, 1 paprika over there, 2 orange bell peppers right here. Peppers at the end, a couple calendula plants. Down here I have 9 beefsteak tomato plants with some sad basil in between them. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm considering doing winter squash in the empty space in between, just to give them ground cover really and to help suppress weeds. I'm going to come through here with my syrup hoe and also get up the weeds that are in there. Like right now there's not much, but the weed pressure increases as summer goes along. So the more you can remove while they're little, the better. You can't just ignore them. It's kind of like sin. If you let the little things in, then they grow and get bigger and bigger until it's really painful to remove it. So take care of the little weeds while they're little, and the rest of your growing season isn't as painful. So peppers, tomato, and basil. I have these 3 low trellises here with zucchini squash. I think all the seeds that I put in the mound came up, and I probably shouldn't have them all there, so there's at least 3 plants per cage, so I'm going to clip 1 or 2 off and let those zucchini grow. If they can go a little bit vertical and be supported by the cage, that's great. These are volunteer tomatoes that I'm going to take out. I let a few volunteer tomatoes grow throughout the garden this spring just to have in case I needed them, in case my seedlings didn't do well. So I have had to replant some of these, and over here on the other side too, tomato plants a few times because some of the transplants didn't take well, but I had more seedlings and more pots, and so I just kept replanting until they took well and the weather was right, I guess. And at the end I've got 2 rows of green beans, and these are too close together just like the ones in the wall, but I wanted to make sure the germination was good and I wouldn't have blanks. So I'm going to come through and just clip with scissors and leave like 1 per foot for the green beans. The lovely dahlia plant that Lowe's provided me. No, I bought it. It was not provided. Another dahlia. All right, ground bed number 10. It's probably hard to see all the layers of green. You can't see as well as I can. Does that help any? So on the 3 trellises in the back are my English peas. Let me come back out again. This is an onion from last year. I'm just going to seed because I love onion seed flowers. Onion flowers, they're very pretty. A few more lettuces from last year gone to seed. Potatoes. So at the front end, there's 2 rows of potatoes in there. And then towards the back is just a single row because broccoli was in the middle part. So technically 4 rows. It was like broccoli, potatoes and broccoli, potatoes, peas. And this is about a 6-foot bed, 5.5, 6 feet wide. So all the broccoli has been clipped. These are some side shoots that are starting to come up. So I might take them and add them to the broccoli in the refrigerator. But I'll be taking all those out and giving them to the chickens. All these potatoes in the ground are Yukon Gold potatoes. And the next big thing I have to do is start picking peas. And that's going to be slightly complicated. And that is why, even though it's an overcast day, I'm wearing a hat and I have sleeves on that I can unroll and make longer if I want to. Let me show you why. All right, you're not going to be able to see probably from this corner, but I'll take a picture or a video from the other end also. But if you look, I did not think about how much the potatoes were going to grow over into the walkway from the wall. And I generally sit on a stool and pick these peas. This will be the 2nd or 3rd year I've had peas here. And it's very pleasant. But now I'm going to have those leaves tickling my head and the back of my neck. And that's just going to make me a little bit paranoid. Let's look from the other end. You gotta get those big weeds when you see them. This is the other end of the peas and potatoes row. So I'm gonna have pretty tight space to work in here. But it's got to be done. Need those peas. Oh, there's a few calendula back here and a lovely dahlia, which will have yellow flowers on it. All right, before I pick the peas, I will show you these rows because there's not much to do here other than look for a few weeds. So let me start down here. It'll be easier. So I've got 6 Roma tomato plants on the wall, and then I put the rest of my Romas down here. I ended up having a few more than I wanted to put in cages, so I did put some extra Roma plants between the cages on the outside. So they might be too close together, but if that does grow up okay, at least it'll have some sidewalls of the cages to support themselves. So I've got another one there. These are all aromas. And it's all carrots. The bushy stuff is carrots. A basil. This one is not aroma. This starts I think it's called, let's see, Thornburns Terracotta. So I did 4 of those. That one's kind of small, but this one's happy and big. 2, 3, 4 Thornburns. And this is called a rose tomato. I've never grown these. I've never grown the terracottas before. I've never grown a rose tomato. I did plant several seeds. This is the only plant that survived. So I've got 1 rose. And these are 2 cherry tomatoes that were volunteers from a cherry tomato plant last year. They were over in the potato bed, and I picked the seedling volunteers up and I transplanted them here, and they are looking great. So I did not start any cherry tomatoes this year, and these 2 more volunteers, and I'm gonna have some cherry tomatoes, more carrots. The first 2 tomato plants in this bed, which is number 12, are purple Cherokee. I have tried them once or twice in the past and I was not impressed with them. I still had more seeds, so I just started a bunch of seeds. I gave a bunch of the plants away. I have planted 2 of these purple Cherokee. Sorry for all that noise. There's driveway grading work going on, and we're going to see how they do. If I don't like them again this year, I'll never plant another purple Cherokee tomato plant. But the rest of the bed, as far as tomatoes go, are Bonnie Best. Those are my husband's preference for slicers. The beefsteaks are great. They're really big, but sometimes they don't work for slicers because they get too big. So we'll see. But the Bonnie Best are the ones that my husband prefers for his red tomatoes. And onions is everything else that's outside. I'm going to try some other tomatoes for red slicers for next year. But this year I just went with Bonnie Best because it's what I had on hand. I've ordered other ones that I have in stock now. The end of this bed was going to have summer squash. I nixed the idea. I didn't want to fight more squash bugs this spring. So what I planted here were actually tomato plants I did not intend to grow this year. These are called Dad's Sunset. They're an orange tomato. They are too close together. I just wanted to make sure enough survived the transplant for me to have the whole trellis full. So I'm probably going to come in and take at least 2 out, maybe 3. So I'll leave a total of 3 or 4 on this 8-foot trellis to grow. But the reason I went ahead and planted these, even though I didn't mean to, I was just mostly going to give those plants away this year, was because my main crop of orange tomatoes has struggled. I've had to replant these multiple times. And on the end of this bed here, I think this one twice, but this one 3 times for sure, I've put a tomato plant in here, and the next day I come out and it's been cut, like right by the ground. And the tomato plant's, of course, laid over and dead. So there's obviously a cutworm somewhere in here on the end of this bed. So I've given up trying to plant any tomato plants on the ends. The rest seem to be sticking and holding pretty well. I might end up taking that small one out, so I'll have 3 per trellis of the Golden Jubilee here. And the rest of the bed has basil, Golden Jubilee, basil, Golden Jubilee. And this one I think is an orange cherry tomato. I forget what they're called, but it's a cherry tomato, but they're going to be orange. And that one I think is also a Golden Jubilee. But what happened here was I put this cage up and, waited a week or 2 before I was getting tomatoes in the ground. And in the meantime, dahlia started coming up. I totally forgot I put a new dahlia here this year. And I've read conflicting advice online whether dahlias and tomatoes will grow well together. I've read it both ways. They do and they don't. So 2024's experiment, will a tomato plant grow happily next to a dahlia? So I planted that one further over towards the edge to give it some space, and it can still be supported by the trellis. So we shall see how that works out. And of course the garlic is still here, finishing off growing its bulbs. We'll be pulling that sometime in June. Well, that was not the most fun I've had picking peas. So this is first spring picking, just the peas that were on the bottoms of the plants that had already started swelling enough to be harvested. The plants are still loaded. I did clear a few spider webs with my bare legs, and it was a little bit challenging climbing over the potato plants to get to the peas on the northern side of the trellis. But I wanted to make use of that bed. I wanted to pack it full, and I did leave myself a walkway. It just doesn't look like a walkway because the potato plants are so big, but I was able to get in there and pick the peas for that. I got onions and the rest of the greens that I've gotten, and strawberries. So that is what's going on today. Other than going through with the stirrup hoe and raking up a few weeds that are in clusters that I don't want to necessarily pick by hand, I am done in here. I'm not watering anything. It's going to rain a lot this weekend. And let me show you where my other pepper plants are also that I transplanted last night. How's the garden, Blue? I saw a bunny in the yard this morning. You and Ginger need to get on the ball. I don't want to see bunnies unless they're in your mouth. Okay? There's nothing growing in the greenhouse right now other than some sweet potato slips that I still need to snap off, but sweet potato plants to transplant at the end of this month. But these are the rest of the pepper plants up here on the southern side of the house. There are 8 red peppers, the California Wonders, 8 red peppers. And that plant is a volunteer Ella campaign from that mommy plant. These were extra asparagus plants we stored up here in case we need them to fill in the beds later on, if any of those asparagus struggle with transplanting we did this spring. Ella campaign cosmos and some mullein and echinacea and sage I need to transplant. This is the mullein looking so pretty. Going to seed, it's its 2nd year. And let me show you some footage from my herb garden from this morning. And this little herb bed, everything is growing nicely. This is not enough oregano for my needs. My sister-in-law had excess, so I've transplanted 2 more pots, and they will get bigger growing areas next year. But I'm definitely keeping my oregano in pots. I will decide this fall where those extra pots are going to go. Let's see. The peonies, I had 3 of the most gorgeous peony blooms this year. They were so pretty. Can't wait to see more next year. Thyme, lavender, onion chives are poopy right now. They were attacked by aphids. Well, the garlic chives were attacked by aphids first, and we burned them up. And then the they moved over here. The aphids moved over here. So they destroyed these onion chives. If more don't come up, I'll start more seeds this fall. I did read that basil helps keep aphids away, so I've put some in there. I started taking out the chamomile plant yesterday. I would clip the branches and then harvest the flowers as I was clipping them. So if I don't have time today, I'll get to it next week. Harvesting a little bit more, clearing this pot out. Now the pot is falling over and needs replacing. So if I put something in here, it'll just be temporary for summer. Sage, another sage. And there's lemon balm in this pot here, and you can see where I tucked a basil in. A dahlia. A ginger. Good morning, Ginger. Rosemary. More mums, more dahlias. And then I'll show you where my summer lettuce is going to be. The northern side of my house, that's a pot with weeds and a lamb's ear. So I need to throw that away. But over here, this gets morning sun for an hour or two, and then it's in shade all the rest of the day until maybe 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So that's a salads mix. Those are lettuce that I'm going to cut leaves from. So that's going to get us plenty of lettuce through the summer for our needs. You know the saying, Rome wasn't built in a day, and this garden was not planted in a day. We had a visitor here yesterday that was buying a rooster for my daughter, and he was looking through our garden and saying how beautiful it was, and said, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it was just one plant at a time. It didn't all come in the same week or the same day or even the same month. It's just little by little. Since January, the very first thing I did this year was start onion seeds, and then after that brassica seeds. Little by little each week, you do a little something. You put it in the ground when it's the right time, and before spring is over, you have a nice full garden ready to give you an abundant harvest. Don't worry, July and August will be here soon enough, and it'll be hot and things will be dead and dying, but we will have gotten a good harvest. And by then, we'll be planting our fall crops for the fall harvest. Don't give up. Whatever you're working towards, little by little, whether it's growing and pruning a garden, or maybe it's your heart, don't give up. Rome wasn't built in a day. Change takes time and effort. Don't give up.